Hello, everybody. Hello. Thank y'all for tuning in. It has been a couple weeks since I've gone live. I think it's been 3, maybe a month. It's been a minute. But I'm back. I'm happy to be here. I am trying to make sure I'm connected everywhere. I'm here on YouTube. I'm on Facebook. Wherever you are, make sure you are subscribed to my YouTube channel. Make sure you like my Facebook page, do all the social media stuff so you can connect with me and that you're able to join into all the broadcasts. I'm going to try to be brief. I have a tendency to be long-winded, so I'm going to try to be brief today to discuss part 3 of Stamped from the Beginning. We have been going through this book for about 3 months. It's been a long time, hopefully less than 3 months, but it's been a while that we've been in this book. So I'm ready to go ahead and get it moving on and be done with this so we can go to the next book, especially now that more people are aware of the book club. So I'm going to try to move really quickly through this. I actually put together a discussion guide. If you are a member of my Patreon, you already have access to this guide. But if not, I have it here for you. And I'll be using it to kind of guide the presentation. Hey, April. How are you? Thanks for tuning in. Okay, so don't be afraid to leave comments, interact. That is what this is for. COVID has stopped us from meeting in person. A book club is just not a good reason to risk your health. So this is my pandemic solution. So we're doing it live. So please feel free to comment and I'll highlight them as they appear. But anyway, let's get into it. As I said, we're going to be discussing Stamped from the Beginning. If you are a member of my Patreon, you have access to this discussion guide, as well as other resources, all the resources that I use to put together this presentation. But we're going to get on into it. And I have some housekeeping things just because, you just never know who's going to come across the video. I just want to talk a little bit about the commenting as I'm encouraging you to do so. Please keep your comments respectful if you're chatting during the live or if you are leaving a comment after the broadcast is ended. I do moderate them, so please be respectful. I appreciate all of your support for this content, this book club, all the new things that I'm doing. So if you want to support it financially, you can do so by becoming a patron for as little. All the patrons have access to exclusive content, early access to content, a special patron-only newsletter with work updates and things like that. So you can contribute that way. You can also just send a contribution via Cash App. If you are on YouTube, you can send a contribution via the super chat if you're watching live. And lastly, the best thing you can do for me and this cause is to share the book club with anyone that you think may be interested in this broadcast. Please do that. I want to touch on quickly a couple of things regarding how the book club is going to go forward. Like I said, we're toward the end of Stamped from the Beginning. The book only has 5 parts. And in the past, I have tried to go chapter by chapter or 2 chapters at a time, 3 chapters at a time to give people time to buy the book, learn about the book club, and decide it's something they want to do. And so it's taken a lot longer to discuss it than I wanted to spend on it. So I'm trying to go ahead and move it along so we can all start together on a new book. So with that said, I really want to encourage you to go back and look at previous streams if you want to, or if you're curious about any of the commentary from that content. But here on out, since there's only 2 more parts left, you can basically expect 2 more discussions. So one next week and one the week after. And then it'll be a small break before we go into the new book. The new book is already on Patreon. I have mentioned this several times, but I'll save it for now. Let's see. So part 3 of the book starts on page 161. There is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 chapters within this part. And so the book is moving chronologically through time. And as you can probably guess, it's going to end with Obama or shortly after Obama. So this is the section of the book that we're in. The next part, I'm really excited about the next part. But for this one, abolitionists started to come to prominence in this section of the book. Now, if this is your first time watching this stream or being part of this book discussion, I just want to let you know this is a historical book. You can see from the cover, it's a history of racist ideas in America. So what that means is, if you're wondering how things got the way that they are, this book basically tells you. And if you're familiar with my Unlearning Movement that I started a couple years ago, it had to be a couple years ago, but I really started to push it last year in 2020. I started this book, that movement, because I had experienced a change in my life from a spiritual point of view. And at the time I wasn't blogging, I wasn't doing any of that. And I felt like God was calling me to do it. And since then, he's shown me more and more exactly where my purpose fits into what needs to be done in the world, or what the world needs. So that's how this book club came about. And I really took a turn with it after the murder of George Floyd. So that's where this book club really comes from, and the anti-Blackness that we're promoting, that's where that comes from. But I'll talk more about that at another time. Now, I'm seeing the internet signal move. So if there are any type of connectivity issues, I will end the broadcast and just pick up at another time, or just on Patreon, but I'll do as much as I can. And if there's any type of connectivity issues that you notice on your end, make sure you comment and let me know, because I'm streaming from a third party. So back to the discussion, guys. So I'm just going to use this. Normally I show videos and do all that, but I don't think I'm going to really do that much today, because I want to make it brief. But we're going to start with democracy in America. So the main thing I got from this book being one of the most that nobody really has thought highly of America in history or now, from a cultural perspective or a moral perspective. We're like the people you don't want to be in the world. And so that was, as much as that's like the joke now and how other countries look at Americans, now it has always been that way if you look at the context of this piece of literature. And it made me think about the way we think about America. Like me and you. You grow up and you're taught to Pledge of Allegiance in elementary school, and you sing the national anthem when you're in the band and before games. So there's this patriotism that you're ingrained in at a very early age, right? And sometimes, I don't know if I'm the only person that's guilty of this, or if you know what I mean, but sometimes I have a tendency to look at other countries and be like, oh, they be singing army songs, they crazy. And, I've separated the way that they show their patriotism from how we do it in America. And this particular literature, once I was reading it, it made me think, like, take away all of that stuff. Like, if I was a foreigner on the outside looking in to America, and the way that Black people are treated in America with, you know, I don't have any white supremacist ideas for the most part, right? We're just going to talk about American racism. You know, maybe I deal with it in my country, but it's not to the level and it's not as systemic as it is in America. So how would I look at America in that way if I took off and took out all of the influence that America has had on me my whole life? Would I still feel the same? Would it have taken me longer to be invested in politics as it relates to what I need or what my community group needs? How would I have been able to navigate life different if I had a more objective view of this country? I think that I'd be a lot different, and I think that I probably would have made a lot of different decisions in my life. But I just thought that was interesting that no one thinks highly of us, yet we're like the place to be in our minds, or we're afraid to live in other places. I just thought that was interesting. Again, as you're coming in, make sure you like the video, share it. You might see me looking off. I feel a cool breeze. Tom just walked out the door. So I'm getting some cold air, just making sure that the door is closed. But yeah, make sure you like the video, share it, and leave me a comment if you hear something that intrigues you. I'm talking from the beginning, as you know, from the title, and some of my pinned comments, and we're using a discussion guide that is available on Patreon. So William Lloyd Garrison. Okay, right. I know you can only see me, but raise your hand if you heard or learned about William Lloyd Garrison growing up. Put a raise hand emoji if you have. I heard of William Lloyd Garrison, but I didn't know enough about him. I did not even think or care to look into him and whether or not what we were taught lined up with his ideology, his real, true ideology. And I thought it was interesting that he was like one of the most beloved abolitionists among the Black community, the African American community. And he really was an assimilationist. Like, he believed that Black people were social problems, you know, like that Black people had some type of impact on the way white people thought about them. Like, it was, you know, we had a role to play in why racism existed. So that's not really somebody that we should be, somebody that we should be like promoting. And I'm looking at notes here. I have notes on the screen and notes here. If you see me look down, it kind of makes sense that he would be heralded as an ally, as somebody that we should have, listened to, because over time, that means he's less likely to face criticism. Because if we've all we've destroyed Uplift suasion. If you have watched one stream besides this one, you've heard me talk at length about Uplift suasion. So I'm not going to go into it. I said I was going to, yes, I am. Because I said I was going to explain it in every single stream. Uplift suasion is basically the concept that Black people could behave their way into being accepted, that Black people had some type of part to play in eliminating racist ideas, which would mean that you believe that something is wrong with Black people from the start. If you believe that Black people have a role to play in eliminating racist ideas or racism, then you believe that there's something wrong with Black people from the beginning. So if you notice, that shows up a lot in society and life. An example of uplift suasion is uplift suasion is when people ask me when I'm going to cut my son's hair because they have long hair. So that's an example of like, why can't they have long hair? Nobody really ever says anything to white little boys with long hair. The most they'll say is, oh, I thought that was a girl. But when you see little black boys with long hair, people always say, in my experience, what I've experienced and what I've seen is, oh, when you gonna cut their hair? That boy need a haircut. That's an example of uplift suasion. I know it sounds like a reach, but I can assure you that it's not. Another example of uplift suasion is when we code switch, when we're acting one way at home and then we're in public, or some of us are at work working with a client, working with a customer, and we have a totally different tone of voice and speech. That's uplift suasion. So it would make sense that people would think William Lloyd Garrison was the bomb because they had already been indoctrinated with uplift suasion. He believed that the closer black people were to white people in terms of our habits, the better black people were. How many black people do you know think like that? That shows you just how much of an impact this type of ideology was at that time, that we're still dealing with this, that we still believe and think these things. It's called assimilation. It's called, making yourself assimilate into culture. And what is even more interesting is that his view of what black people should do to kind of deal with racism or to eliminate it, that reflected what some black people thought. Notice the key word, elite black people. These are the same black people who invited him to their events and who supported his newspaper. So there's something to pull out from that if elite black people are inviting him, that means they're inviting this harmful way of thinking into our culture. How often do you see that now? We have the most obvious modern day example is our last presidential election. Joe Biden did not have a plan for Black Americans, but he sought after Black American votes, and Black Americans pretty much harassed you, didn't want to talk to you anymore, made fun of you if you did not want to vote for him because he had no plan. No one wanted to deal with him not having a plan. It was pretty much, well, this is the person that's going to save us because we believe in him, and your life really ain't affected. He's better than what we had, but not really. That's an example of like the assimilating. Like, you can't speak out about what you need as a Black person. You need to just hush, shut up, and vote. You just need to vote. Vote Democrat. Don't ask why. Don't ask what they got planned for you. All this stuff is saying. It may not be articulating my example like I want to, but it's hopefully I've said enough for you to kind of get my point. And if you have a specific question, just leave it in the comments and I'll do my best to answer it. But as you can see from the my little sign on there, this does not work. This does not work because we're talking. If you look on this part of the book is on page 168. That time period is in the 1800s. This is around 1832, 1835, 1830s. If this is what they were saying in the 1830s was going to be the key to dealing with racism, why is it that in 2021 we're still dealing with the same thing? That shows you it doesn't work. So I want to encourage you, moving forward today, that is not the answer. If you are behaving in a certain way, if you're trying to reach a certain standard of measurement based off of whether or not white people approve of you or approve of your life, approve of your feelings and your thoughts and what's important to you politically. If you're doing all that because you don't want to agitate a white person or someone who does not understand what it's like to be Black, then you just need to speak up and speak out and be you and have your voice, because it doesn't work. They're still gonna be, if they have a racist mindset, it's nothing you can do to change their behavior. This book has shown us, and history shows us, 2021 today, March 2nd, shows us that when they do approve of you, let's say if they're racist like a Donald Trump, they look at you as an exceptional Negro. And no disrespect, I've been using what the book talks about. You are the exceptional Negro. If you have somebody who believes in racism or they don't see their privilege, you're their exceptional, aka token Negro. So it's nothing you can do to change the way they feel overall. They'll just adjust their behavior with you, if that makes sense. So while you're here, I see a couple more hearts. I don't know exactly what platform they're coming from, but please like the video, share it if you think somebody that you know or are connected to may find it beneficial. So I wanted to go on to the housing discrimination. So this was something that was brought up in this book that many Black people were dealing with housing discrimination back then. And there's a lot to say about this. It's a lot I want to say about it. One of the hot topics right now in the conscious community, the conscious Black community, Black conscious community, however you want to say it, one of the hot topics right now is reparations. That has been a conversation that is picking up traction, that has always kind of been being had by certain groups, but now we're hearing more about it in mainstream media. And one of the things that I'm noticing when it comes to Black people being righted for the wrong that has been done to our community, whether or not it's us or someone before us, is that there's like this paternalistic approach with everything. You look at housing, right? Racist housing policies date back to these times, as you can see in the book on page 170. Back then, these racist policies that basically put Black people in certain pockets of cities, and then they became known as Black neighborhoods. We've talked about it a little bit. That built up the living in your Black neighborhoods, living in Black areas. We have that here in Jackson where I live. Some people want to leave Jackson because they think it's better in Madison, or they think it's better in Rankin County or whatever. But really what it is Jackson is a predominantly Black city. Jackson does not have the same resources, and you deal with a lot more in your face prejudice in these other places. But the reason that people want to do that and believe that is because racist housing policies have led to folks not wanting to live around Black people or live in Black neighborhoods. Now, the other part of that, what I want people to see, to do with this book club, is to say that slavery has taken on different shapes and forms since it was abolished. So if you think about it, Black people lived in shacks on plantations, right? Then they had to go to these, poor, terrible parts of town. And now as they're moving into cities and moving to the north, they're dealing with housing discrimination. And when we talk about the historical context of things, we sometimes forget that this stuff is going on now. And just as early as February 15th, like of this year, a couple weeks ago, a Black couple talked about how their home appraisal went higher when they had a white friend to pretend to be the homeowner. So it is no different from back then. We're still dealing with discrimination in that way, especially with housing. And another thing is, if you look at, and I brought up reparations to make this point. If you look at the Holocaust, America has actually paid reparations to Jewish people. So Jewish people who, something that didn't even happen in America, were paid, whereas Black people have not been paid for reparations. Paid their reparations is not even really on the table, and they kind of playing in our face with the discussions and the hearings that they're having on it. So some people will say, "Oh, well, I'm doing good. You know, we don't need reparations. I'm doing good. Y'all just need to work harder." That's an example of the uplift suasion that I talked about, and the assimilation. But we're not looking at the similarities between the Holocaust and what slavery did, and how things just have taken on different forms. If you look at housing projects, that is like, some of them look like internment camps. Like that's America's version of it. And that's why I started this stream with, could you imagine yourself as an outsider looking in on America? What would your thoughts be if you didn't actually live here? If you weren't actually connected to America, if you weren't ingrained to be a patriot since you were in public school as an elementary school kid? How would you look at America different? And so looking at housing projects where it's mainly Black people living in them, then they're giving you rules. You can't make this amount of money. You can't do this person can't live here. All of these different things, it's all the same. It's all the same. And if you notice, like, how people will talk about renting versus buying, like, have y'all seen people have that discussion? And I'm not here to say one is better than the other, but people having it, like, some people have an elitist attitude toward owning a home, and all that comes from uplift suasion. I hate to say it, but it does. And the Housing Act that talked that, like, oh, Black people were able to get these loans and all that stuff, and then it turned out to be not so good loans. That's where all those Twitter takes, like, come from. That all that fits under this discussion, umbrella, this discussion. I hope that makes sense. I want to talk about the dynamic between enslaved children and white children at the time too. What I'm doing, you're just tuning in, I'm discussing part 3 of beginning. It looks like I'm kind of having some connectivity issues, so just be patient. It's showing on my end now. But we're talking about part 3 of Ibram X. Kendi's book, Stamped from the Beginning. And basically, to keep it moving so that I can be done at a reasonable amount of time and be done with this book before the end of the month, I'm just pulling out, like, things that I found interesting. So I'm loosely going by a discussion guide. If you want access to the discussion guide, you can get it on my Patreon. The links are in the description box. They should be. If they're not, it's here on the screen. You can just look me up, Patreon at Just the Simi and Lofton. But I'm just pulling out points that I wanted to make. If it seems like I'm jumping around, I'm not going through the whole entire part like I have done in the past. And I talked about why at the beginning. But anyway, I want to talk a little bit about the dynamic between enslaved Black children, African children, and white children. And basically, novels and children's books back then were created to instill racist ideas even within children. And some of the interviews that were done with former slaves talked about how like the white kids would play master with the black kids. The black kids were treated like pets by the white children. And if you think about this is something that I want my husband to come on at some point to talk about, because we had this discussion not too long ago about learning about Black history. Like Black History Month just ended. Some controversy around it, very minimal, about a city school district wanting to ban Black History Month, like ended. So these are still relevant things. You know, it's based in history, but it's history that we're still living out. And I just want, if you're tuned into this broadcast, I want you to always be able to make the connection. The whole purpose of this book club is to take things that we know in history, learn more about them, and then connect the dots. And I feel my personal belief and what it has done for me, it has allowed me to see the world in a different way. And it has also allowed me to navigate it differently as well. It's helped me to build my confidence. I feel empowered because I realize all this stuff is made up. And I don't feel like I don't take on that assimilation belief that I need to align myself with whiteness to be successful. I don't, that burden has been lifted from me as I've learned about the history and what America has done. It has empowered me to want to do more for my community and to help people learn the things that I'm learning so we can talk about it and figure out what we need to do going forward. That's the whole point of the book club, is to deal with racism, learn where it comes from, be able to identify it and call it out, have the knowledge to speak about it in an articulate way and in a way where you can pose questions to others for them to think critically, and then figure out what policy we need, or if we need to do something just within our group together. So this is a collaborative process. And I just want to always point out the connections that I see. So as you're watching and liking the video and sharing it, make sure you comment if something comes to your mind so we can talk about it. I want this to be interactive. But anyway, I have some PDFs of these these children's books. I'm sorry, I have some of the PDFs on Patreon. I have all those resources there. But this still happens today with school districts and classrooms and how some districts are underfunded. You know, the racism shapeshifts. And before it was, Black children being literal pets for white kids. And now it looks like white school districts and white public schools having more resources and funding than Black schools. I wanted Turner. I was familiar with Ned Turner before I got into this book, but I wasn't like a Ned Turner expert. So I was able to look in Ned Turner's story and kind of relate to it. So if you let me know what you know about Ned Turner, but I'm going to talk about how his belief system. Ned Turner, his portion of the book starts on page 172. And he basically viewed America from a spiritual perspective. And I agree with the way that he viewed it. And that has led to me practicing my own spirituality and my Christianity in a similar way. And I've talked about this so much. I talk about this every time I come on because I want people to understand that it's not, we're not talking about the religion as we're supposed to practice it like in the real world, right? I'm speaking about my sister, Ned Turner. Okay, she's talking about Dr. Umar. He a whole different conversation. But I'm talking about like the Christian faith and how it has caused us to act. And it's real, and I want people to understand why that's relevant. And it's relevant because here in America, and I'm trying to choose my words very carefully. Here in America, Blacks, African Americans were converted to Christianity. I have not read, not saying it's not out there. That's not what I'm saying. But I haven't read any historical accounts of slavery that suggested that any of the slaves were already Christians. Everything that I've read in this book in particular has talked about Christianity, about them enslaved Africans being converted. So that's what I'm talking about from that point forward. So if from day one, Black folks are being converted to Christianity and that is now our faith, then that means that it has had a role to play in our life and in our experiences since we came to America by means of slave ships. So I'm saying it to say when we talk about Ned Turner, he was enslaved, obviously, but he was a preacher. And so he's preaching from this Bible that his slave masters have given him. And as he's reading it, he's beginning to feel like God is telling him that he needs to shut all this stuff down because his people should not have been being treated that way. And it's relevant for today's times because you have to ask yourself, how has our faith system guided us through this life in America, this American experience? And why are we still in such a weary position? Why are we still at the bottom? Again, I'm not talking about being equal or being above. I'm not talking about being above someone. I'm talking about being equal. Why are we still unequal? Why is there still inequality? And this is the faith that we all have. This is what we believe, and we're believing in a God who is going to deliver us. Why are other groups delivered but not us? And so then, a lot of people, this is kind of where I've hit walls with pastors and people who are really deep off into the church. This is where the conversation kind of hits a wall, which is why I can relate to Ned Turner. Now, I'm not going to say I would have led a slave rebellion because I don't know if I would have had this type of courage myself, but he was empowered for his slave rebellion because of the Bible. And so when we find ourselves in 20, still one of those religious groups of people, still knocking down the church even though it's COVID, still praying over everything and being staunch religious people, what does that have to say about our plight in America? Is that, or is the way it was presented to us keeping us from interpreting it correctly? Is it making us feel like we're the chosen people? Like, where do you stand in it? Because for me, I can't really go about the way that I practice my faith the same way before I knew this. And I'm not saying that I don't believe in Jesus. That ain't what I'm saying. I just don't agree with the way that we have been taught and led to believe about Jesus and about who we are. if that makes sense. I'm really trying to pick my words carefully. I hope that y'all get what I mean. But I feel like in many, many, many ways, the perversion of Christianity, the perversion of the faith has hindered us. Meaning, we don't even realize, and I did not realize this, like I said, until the George Floyd murder and things just started to not, like, it was always there. Really, I couldn't deny it anymore after that. Like, because I was attending a multiracial church, and for a very long time, nobody even brought it up. You know, nobody even brought up what happened. No one said anything for longer than I felt was appropriate. And it just made me think, you know, how can you see this and be aware of this as a Christian, as someone who loves God and believes that our God is sovereign and he is in control of everything and he loves us all? How can you see that and not be moved to speak on it or be moved to feel like you had to take your God to deal with it? And I just started to have a lot of questions after that. And I'm saying all that to say that I can relate to the way Ned Turner interpreted some of the scripture. If you look at Exodus and you look at the Israelite story, Moses, if you look at all of that, it's very easy to feel like it's referring to Black people. And so when Ned Turner is reading this, he's feeling empowered. And that is really what the word should do to us. But why don't the majority of Black Americans feel that empowerment in the way that Ned Turner felt it? Could it be that our religion and the way that we've been taught to behave, going back to the things that I've already discussed, could all of that stuff be connected to why we still have the same problems in 2021? That's basically what I'm trying to say. I don't know if I'm saying it clearly or what, but all of that's what I'm trying to get to. And how many of us are Christians because we thoughtfully made that choice? Do you fit? For me, I feel like I didn't have a choice, but I'm not saying that I didn't make a choice either, if that makes sense. Like, I'm saying I didn't have a choice because I grew up, my mom, you know, is Christian. And so we, of course, went to church. We went to Black churches and all that. I went to the first church ever with non-Black people in my 30s. So I grew up in a Black church culture. So I did not really have a choice. You know, they would say, well, you have a choice to, you know, say you accept Jesus Christ to get baptized and that. But at the same time, you really don't. Like, not if your parents are really into it. So I feel like, well, I didn't really have a choice and I couldn't make an informed decision because I have been taught to not question certain things because of, you know, you can't question God and you can't do that. But then, you know, it's like, well, if I don't do, like, I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't. Like, I'm damned if I do because I'm agreeing to something or I'm entering a faith that maybe I don't really fully understand, or maybe I don't understand why I should be part of this faith. If this is if all the people around me, their lives are no better, you know, we still singing the same songs, we still fighting the same fights. Why would I want to be part of that? But I don't really have a choice and I can't ask those questions. And then if I don't do it, I'm going to hell. You know, so I feel like there's a whole thing there, like with the church and with religion. And I feel like, I don't know if you see it, but right now in the world, I feel like there is a lot of movement in this topic area. Like, since I know for sure, since I started doing these streams and these discussions and having these same questions myself and doing research and trying to find people who were talking about it, I have seen it myself. Excuse me. More people are having these discussions and more people are asking questions and being a lot more bold than I probably have ever seen. You know, so I feel like there is a shift happening. So I'm excited to really dive more into that. Our next book for the book club talks directly about Christianity. So it's going to be interesting. But moving on from Ned Turner, we have these abolitionist tracts. So basically, these were like little pamphlets that the abolitionists use. And if you're looking, like, this is the beginning of the media. You know, there was no Instagram back then. Can you imagine a world with no Instagram and Twitter and Facebook? Some of us can, because we're old enough to be able to imagine that. But my children won't know a world without social media. So these were modern day media campaigns. And this is also about, this is a religious thing too. So I'm still going to be talking about it a little bit. But if you look at this first picture of the African, he's obviously enslaved. He has chains on his arms. He's in tattered clothing. He's looking up to the sky, to the God. Like, the other Black person is kneeling. We have sermons that's encouraging people to become abolitionists. And take this right here, what you're saying. This was their CNN. This was their ABC. This was their Fox News. This was their NBC, MSNBC. This was that for them. These abolitionist tracts. These were forms of media. This is content written by someone. How often do we see in the media Black people in these docile, forgiving positions? How often do we see that? In the Stand From the Beginning book, this part of the book starts on page 177. But these abolitionist tracts, they challenged racist ideas, such as Blacks, not being capable of being free, right? But at the same time, they produced other racist ideas, such as African people being naturally religious and naturally forgiving people who, if you whip them and all that, they still have compassion and they forgive you. So if you look at these images, you can see that. That's the depiction. And I want to take it a step further and talk about how we see that now in our modern day media. Black people being seen as forgiving. And I want to tell you right now, when you see stories like this, whether you want to believe me or not, this is a trick. This is a strategy. This is the same strategy that was used for the abolitionist tracts. Y'all remember the case of Botham John? I know how to pronounce it, but I don't. You remember him? He was killed by Amber Geiger. She was a Dallas police officer. He was 26. You can see from the slide the details and facts of the case. But I'm trying to make a connection here. This is the direct play. The way this was covered, especially after the court case, was a complete strategy on behalf of the media. And it's something that we see over and over and over and over when it comes to Black people being on the brunt end. And the title of this slide here, slaveholders and other races believe that Blacks were forgiving and compassionate toward their oppressors, and they use that to justify slaveholding. So I don't know where y'all are in your consciousness, your political consciousness, your political, I don't know where you are politically when it comes to Blackness, but you have to look at everything as, you got to look beyond the surface of everything. You have to like really pay attention to everything. Now, you see the title. Blacks were portrayed as forgiving. Slaveholders believed that their slaves forgave them. They justify slaveholding because the way they primed Black people to not speak out, to not rebel. You know how they did that? They killed other people. They hung other slaves, enslaved people who tried to escape. So you have to know that if that was that strategy, how do we keep Black people behaving? How do we keep Black people on doing what we want them to do? We continue that, but we do it in other ways. We do it by means of the media. How many media, please put it in the comments, whether you're watching this live or whether you are watching the replay. How often have you seen Black people forgiving murderers and killers in court cases? And how many times have you seen white people do that? What's the story when it comes to Black folks? It's always the forgiveness. And I was going to play this video, but I'm not. But just for the sake of time, I'm not. But Botham Jean's brother hugged his brother's murderer. The Black judge hugged her and said that they forgave her. Now, the sinister thing about this is if you look in the comment section, you know what? I gotta show it. I have to show it. So I'm going to pull up the actual video. Only because I want to show you the comment section. And so this is what this supports what I'm trying to say about religion. If you look at this comment section, and they are, for all the profile photos that we see, they're all white. God, a true testimony to God, this young man is. He needed this for his own healing. It definitely wasn't for her. God bless this young man. Let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and truth. 1 John 3:8. Such a powerful moment. The full purpose of forgiveness there. That young man is full of the Holy Spirit. God is pleased with him. So my question is that, one, is that a natural response? It's not. But two, is that how we are to interpret the scriptures? And if so, why is that only a thing for Black people in these type of situations? That makes you feel like that's the thing you got to do. I have to, I'm a Christian. I have to say I forgive him. I have to say this, and that. And I learned this from a white church conference, that there are levels to forgiveness. There's a process for forgiveness. And we miss all that when it's blasted in our faces like this over and over and over. That's a trick and that's a strategy. And I'm going to tell you why. As I'm pulling it together, I just want to thank y'all for tuning in and ask you to like this video, share it with people who you believe would find it beneficial or who want to take part in the discussion, because we are wrapping up our stems from the beginning discussion. So this is what I want to share with you. Oh, here's another one. So how many of you remember the Charleston church shooting? And look at the news grabs that I got. They're all talking about forgiveness. What forgiveness means 5 years later. Charleston victim's mother tells Dylan Roof, I forgive you, as he's sentenced to death. Do y'all remember a big thing about Dylan Roof? He was unapologetic about shooting up their church. But these are the news stories that we see. They even did a whole piece for the Today Show about some of the survivors talking about their forgiveness. Now, I want to tell you, now I'm bringing it full circle. We see these media stories, and these are just 3 examples. This is just 3. There are many, many more. Now, before I go to my next slide, I wanted to share something because I'm going to prove to you that I'm not reaching and I'm not just being super woke. I am a 2-time graduate in the industry of mass communications. I received my bachelor's of communication and mass comm from Jackson State University, and I did my master's in public relations from the University of Southern Miss. I have practiced mass comm in the communications field since 2009, so I am very well versed in media and media tactics, media strategy. I build media strategies for a living, and I am telling you that there is a theory in media called the Cultivation Theory that I want to explore to prove my points about this. The Cultivation Theory has research dating all the way back to the 1960s. And the whole point of the theory is to say that, look, if you watch a lot of TV, and back then it's TV. Right now, what are people spending all their time on? Social media. So it's even worse and even less filtered. But this theory suggests that, and it has been proven, that people who have a high frequency of viewing media messages are more susceptible to those messages and the belief that they are real. And media cultivates attitudes that what we see on TV is real. My husband tells me all the time that I base some aspects of our marriage off of TV, you know, like certain things that I believe aren't realistic. And that's true, from watching Disney movies and love stories and just things that we see on TV all the time. It leads us to believe that they are real. So when you couple that with seeing Black people being forgiving after victims, what does that tell you? What do you believe then? Black people are naturally forgiving people. And that, I'm sorry, that has led to our continued oppression on one end or the other. People are not going to really fight for what you need if you going out there talking about, oh, I forgive them, it's okay, God's going to give me justice. God is not just, he doesn't just operate when you dead and in heaven. He operates when we're alive. That's what we're taught, right? So why is there this disconnection? Why does it not connect when it comes to the issues in the Black community? We have to really talk about how organized religion, especially Christianity, has held Black people back. And it was designed to be that way from the very beginning. If you go back to some of we have talked about this, seen the evidence of how at one point Black people were not allowed to be Christians, and then they were, because they realized that that would make them better slaves, that would make them better slaves to be Christians. So you cannot just say, oh, that was then, there was a perversion, and not talk about what the perversion looks like and how it has impacted us. And if we can see some things that don't add up, maybe that's something we need to work on and talk about and figure out and fix. And I just don't see that happening. And it's not very encouraging. It's like, dang, what is it so hard to believe? And so you always hit that wall, and the wall that you hit is racism. Racism by white people and non-Black people of color. That's a whole different story. And you see it in Black people's attitudes themselves. And I'm just here to say, like, look, y'all, that's on purpose. And so we need to train our minds to think differently. We need to unlearn. We need to unlearn some of these things that we've been taught, some of these generational things. We really need to investigate. That's what all this is about. And I know that that's a hot topic, but I have experienced this. I have lived this. And there is something, like, we have to have that conversation, or we just need to hang all of this up, because it's 2021. Like, we have to start being really realistic about this fight for equality. We have to start really being serious about it. Like, are we going to deal with it the way it needs to be dealt, based on what we know and what we're continuing to experience? If not, then we just need to leave it alone. And I'm hoping that the more people who watch this, the more people who look into these books, the more people who find out about this book club, or different people who are having these discussions, that it becomes to be the norm for us. And what I'm seeing, like, I know it's a lot going on. We're in a pandemic. We're trying to live. But y'all, we are at war. Black people have been at war for centuries. Is it centuries? Yes, 400 plus years. When is enough enough? That's my question. When is enough enough? I have a couple more slides, but this is just continuing on the topic about Black people. If they made the best slaves, they made the best Christians. Again, because we're naturally forgiving. We're childlike in the way that we're affectionate. We want to hug you and tell you, I'm sorry that I forgive you for killing my innocent brother while he was eating ice cream. I forgive you. Give me a hug. So when we see that in the media, based on cultivation theory, we start to believe that. And you think about a person who doesn't understand who they are as a Black person. They don't understand who God created them to be. They're saying that they feel like that is the thing to do. And so what happens? You never get justice. And it has nothing to do with whether the person that's guilty, it has nothing to do with whether or not they are asking for forgiveness. This ain't got nothing to do with the person. So I'm not saying make your decisions on other people. No, I'm saying make your decisions on logic. You know, we were made to fear, if we don't forgive somebody, we going to hell. You know, like, you have to look at the scriptures that have been used to model your behavior. And I believe in the Bible too. Like, I'm a Christian, y'all. I want us to understand that we can still be critical and not say that, not be unbelievers. I'm a believer. But I'm not a believer in the way that I've been taught about it and taught to be my whole life. Because you have to look at the different filters to, by the time it got to you, the person before you, what was their journey and experience, and how did they view this world? Then the person before then, because we've seen, history has shown us, we have all the data that our history was tampered with. We weren't made to know certain things. Look at the movie Judas and the Black Messiah, the MLK and FBI documentary. So much has been hidden from us. These are the things that we just know. What about the we don't know about? So you cannot be naive to think that our religion was not tampered with. Everything as it relates to Black people have been tampered with. So it's important that we take that mind frame off when we have these discussions, because that's going to be the key to a different way of life for us. And a way of life for us that does not involve being the tail. You know, we waiting on that the day we ain't the tail anymore, yet nothing's happening. But anyway, moving on. I wanted to talk about the doctor who is the father of modern day gynecology, who experimented on slaves. This was a thing. I'm working on a maternal health project, and it talks about, Black women being more likely to die in childbirth. So racism is embedded in our American medicine. Racism is embedded there. He would practice his procedures on enslaved women. He would travel to Africa to practice these procedures, and he did not give them. One, they couldn't give consent, but also they didn't have any anesthesia. And he was practicing, he refused to give anesthesia to Black patients. You can see that toward the end of the articles there. But do look into him. And so when you hear those reports about racism in medicine and all of that, they are true. And this book goes into great detail about it. So moving on, we're going through a lot of different chapters, but I wanted to touch on paternalism by white liberals and white supremacists. Frederick Douglass, remember when we talked about the what's the name of it? The Black exhibits. When we went over that chapter, how Frederick Douglass and Phyllis Wheatley and other Blacks were seen as like exhibits of these exceptional Negroes, your Black excellence, all of that. Frederick Douglass started to know how paternalistic white liberals were, and white people who held these ideas. And he began to see that, hey, if we are doing a Black movement, it's important that the leaders of these movements are Black. We need to have Black organizing. We need to have our own thing to specifically deal with our issues. Some of the liberals were against that. You can see here the quote from the book on page 200 that the interracial organizers lashed back. And so this is like the Rainbow Coalition thing by Fred Hampton. That's been something that I have talked about in my previous video, my previous pre-recorded video, where I was reviewing Judas and the Black Messiah. And I was talking about how I'm not down with the Rainbow Coalition. Like, I get it, but I'm not down with it because I don't believe that it'll work. Because what happens when Black people get what they need? Why we don't know? We can't say because it's never happened, but other groups have gotten theirs. So why do we still need to do a Rainbow Coalition? Why does everyone need to be a part of what we're trying to get for ourselves? The only thing that happens is that our issues get pushed further back. Frederick Douglass knew this. He knew this back then. So that's a very important point that I just had to talk about. Moving on, I'm trying to move a little quicker. The truth about Abraham Lincoln. And this was interesting. This was new information to me reading a book. I'm not reading this book. I'm not gonna lie, because all I knew and cared to know about Abraham Lincoln was he emancipated slavery. I ain't never looked into him more. I just didn't. I didn't have the desire to. So when I be preaching about what people need to do and what they need to learn, I'm talking to myself too, because I wasn't always this way. But Abraham Lincoln, he was not like so compassionate toward Black people. He only opened up to the idea of emancipation because it would save the Union. It had nothing to do with Black people. So he's not this savior that people try to make him out to be. And some former slaves actually referred to Abraham Lincoln as like their Messiah. They believed that he was like a version of God. And this man didn't care about Black people at all. And so that's something, going back to my earlier point about education, about how everything is a strategy. We are not taught that about Abraham Lincoln. I don't know anybody from elementary school who knew that he wanted to stay Union. it had nothing to do with his love for Black people. He is heralded as this amazing person who was on Black people's side and felt like they needed to be free from slavery. And that was not the case at all. And this is another quote about Abraham Lincoln, the way that he viewed African spirituality and just the way that African people were. Well, not Abraham Lincoln, I'm sorry. This was this was Abraham Lincoln. It was Abraham Lincoln. Oh, I love to talk about Joe Biden, X Twitter. The people that follow me on Twitter probably tired of me talking about Joe Biden, but I feel like there's a lot of irony between Abraham Lincoln and Joe Biden, because Joe Biden did not care about Black people. He never has, ever. He never, ever, ever has. And when I tell you, the more I learned about Joe Biden and paid attention to him, he was definitely the media's president. This is dead. All of this stuff, it was all this stuff was pre-done. That old faking, y'all see how Kamala was on his ass during the debates, but guess where she is now? In the White House with him. So all of this stuff, do you see the finesse? And Obama, what type of Black man are you? Or do you claim to be? How you supposed to be? We supposed to listen to you and you feel like you can tell us what to do and all that. And you allow this racist man to really win the presidency off of your back. You want to know why? Because Obama's not team Black either. And all you have to do is look up the recent podcast, the interview that he did, look up his speech at Morehouse. Obama can really kiss my ass, and I hate that I ever voted for him. And so that brings me to another point. I saw people saying on Twitter, I have since taken a break from Twitter. I literally only go on to Twitter to just share what I have going on. I cannot take the toxicity of Twitter anymore. So I do want you to follow me there just so you'll have another place to get my updates. But I just cannot spend time on Twitter like I once did, because it affects me mentally, because I'm like, these people just stupid as hell and they think they know everything. They are so dumb. And then y'all perpetuating the same stuff you say you hate. But anyway, I talk about Joe Biden a lot. I talk about him a lot. And people are saying, oh, well, who are we going to vote for if Joe Biden wasn't good for us and Trump wasn't good for us? And it's stupid. Everybody been telling y'all to vote down ballot. You vote for the people you want to vote for in your city, in your county, but don't opt out of voting for the president. Send a message. Your vote is powerful. The fact that you're asking someone else who to vote for and what to do and what decision to make shows that you don't know enough to be voting in the first place. We have to have a responsibility of looking at these politicians, because all Black America has done, and I ain't talking about myself. Well, I am talking about myself, because this is wasn't my first time voting. I did vote, but I opted out of the presidential vote because my life don't make it. Joe Biden was just as bad for me as Trump. My life, I ain't worried about America. I'm worried about my life. America ain't worried about me. It didn't make no difference. So I opted out of voting for the president, but I did vote for the other positions, the other seats or whatever. But we have to stop being reactionary. You gotta stay ready so you don't ever have to get ready. Y'all know this saying. You don't want to be a person who goes through life reacting to things. You want to be a person that's proactive. One of the things that one of the major differences between me and my husband is that I'm very proactive. I think about all these different kind of scenarios, all these things before I do anything. If I know that we're about to go shopping, for example, and the kids are with us, I'm making sure I got diaper bags, extra clothes, a cup, some snacks. I'm going to be prepared. And I feel like we need to do a better job of educating ourselves politically so we can make sounder decisions, even if it means withholding our vote. Because look, Joe Biden hadn't made one executive order that did anything transformative for Black people. Nothing that really did anything at all, to be honest. He reversed a commission that Trump had set up that was dealing with public school education and what was taught in curriculums about race. That's it. Meanwhile, we've seen executive orders for LGBTQ, executive orders for immigrants. Black people have got nothing, despite Black people being the people who literally put him in office. So you cannot continue to say that there's a lesser of two evils. No, evil is evil, and you can choose to send a message. I am so hyped that I didn't vote for him and that I don't have to feel any type of regret because I knew what it was going to be like going into it. And this is just another quote about Lincoln, how they likened Abraham Lincoln to Jesus Christ. And there are different quotes from the book. I think my kids are about to walk in, but I'm almost done. I got 6 couple slides. I'm going to go through them quickly. Oh, so this is good. HBCUs and assimilation. Assimilationists founded HBCUs, right? And they founded Marley's knocking on the door. They founded HBCUs to educate Blacks and then send them back to educate their other people. And really they were trying to prove themselves to segregationists, the teachers and the students. And light-skinned Blacks, ended up going to universities and things like that, and darker-skinned Blacks ended up pursuing trades. And I know, like, HBCU people don't want to go there, but there is definitely still some truth to that. Hey, Mason. My baby's just walked through the door. Mommy. Hey. Yeah, go with Daddy. So there's still some truth with it to that. Like, I have experienced it. There is a certain elite attitude among HBCUs. You can even look at sororities and fraternities and see that. But that's a whole different discussion. I would love to kind of talk more about that later. I'm going to try to finish up now that the boys are here. But colorism was reflected. Colorism is a huge, huge thing that a lot of people are talking about now. It really deserves its own video and discussion. But colorism is something that's really within our community that started as slavery when Black darker skinned slaves were separated from lighter skinned slaves. We can talk more about that. And I have to the KKK. This is gonna be my last point. No, I'll just wait. I have the rest. I was at the done. I have the rest of. Come on. I have the rest of the slides in Patreon. Mason, are you gonna say hey? Huh? I have all of the discussion materials and the resources available on Patreon. But I hope you guys have enjoyed the discussion. I pretty much got through it. Almost at an hour and a half, but with them here, there's no way I'm gonna be able to finish. So I thank y'all for tuning in. Thank you, Bree, for coming, and thank you, April, for commenting. And if you're just hopping on, just rewind it. Go back and look at it from the start, and you can also look at some of my previous streams. But I'll be back on Thursday, my Thursday stream day. I normally talk about what's going on in pop culture, and we got a lot of stuff to talk about. So I will see y'all Thursday. Oh, one more thing. I'm going to be experimenting with different times. In the past, I've done this stream at about 1 o'clock, 1:30-ish. But I came on today at 4:30. it didn't look like this was a good time based on the numbers. I usually had higher numbers earlier. So my next experiment will be doing this later in the evening. So if you see me going live at different times, just know I'm trying to find the best time for y'all.
Mason's spinning.
Okay, don't do that, Mason.
He's spinning juice.
Okay, so I'm going to be trying to figure out like the best times to do this. And I know I work from home, so I'm kind of like always multitasking, but I know some people actually go in to the office and things like that. So just let me know, give me some feedback on what the best time would be, and just be aware that I'll be switching these up just to experiment myself. But again, thank you. Please share this video. Give me a thumbs up, like it. I'll be back again Thursday going live about pop culture stuff, and I'll see you again next Tuesday to finish up the book discussion. We'll be doing part 4 next week. You can connect with me on social media. Make sure you follow me. All of the links can be found in my bio, but I'm also going to put my website up here so you can find everything there. It just went on Facebook and YouTube. So if you use that link, you can find everything else. And I will see you guys next time. Don't forget to subscribe if you are on YouTube. Bye-bye.